Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Red Devils. We are live and good evening. It is the evening show, 7:30, and we're off. And a very interesting update coming off not particularly long ago, actually, which is very exciting. A bit of an injury update coming out of Carrington with a couple of key players being confirmed in training. Coming up in tonight's show, we're going to be talking about Thomas Frank in his audition for Manchester United. We've been talking about the fitness update. We're going to be talking about Harry Maguire being sold in January, as well as potential moves for Sesko, as well as having a look at the weekend ahead. So plenty to get through, as well as an interesting story about Chelsea scouts being banned from academy games. Which is going to be an interesting one to go through as well. So before we get into it, please do smash the like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. This is day 2 of doing this. We're on to our 3rd show. So obviously, it's going to be a bit slow at the beginning. Things are going to pick up, and looking forward to growing the channel and getting the community going and the likes. So without any further ado, let's get into it, shall we? A positive update from Carrington with Mazraoui having confirmed having been training today ahead of Brentford. Whether he will be fully fit and ready to go this weekend, we wait to see. But the good news is that Mazraoui, alongside Alejandro Garnacho, as well as Ahmad, were all present in training, whilst Man Udt, who was substituted during a game for Uruguay in the week, took part in a recovery session and therefore could still potentially be in line to play this weekend. Players that were not part of the training session and are confirmed out include Kobe Mainoo and Harry Maguire, who have both picked up muscle injuries during the match against Aston Villa and will be out for a few weeks. Mason Mount is continuing his recovery from a knock sustained against Spurs, and Luke Shaw has also got a muscle injury, and they are making apparently steady progress. Their words, not mine. Whilst Till Malacia took part in the first stage of the group session. So positive news in the injury front, which makes a nice change from Manchester United point of view, because things have been very, very negative when it comes to injuries. There have been lots of injuries, and we were talking about across the left back. Well, if Mazraoui is fit for this weekend, then we might yet still see him on the right, Delo on the left, and maybe not be as bad as things initially seemed. So that's a nice positive update. Now, Erik Ten Hag will give his press conference tomorrow at 1:30, and we will have an immediate reaction from it. We will talk about the injuries, for example, those that are officially fit. We'll talk a little bit about what he had to say about Brentford, as well as a bit of an update on what was happening over the international break. Hopefully, a lot of good work. Hopefully, a lot of players working on very big, important individual stuff. Hopefully, some work on some tactics, and hopefully a bit of a planning session, how we're going to navigate the next few weeks, because our bad start means that the next few weeks are vitally important, and cannot afford to continue dropping games and not getting results as we have so far in the early stages of this season. And that brings us to our next point of discussion, which is Saturday a audition for Thomas Frank for the INEOS group, given the fact that he is potentially a candidate to take over should Erik Ten Hag get sacked during the season. We've spoken about this during the week, the fact that Thomas Frank has not ruled out a potential move sooner rather than later from Brentford, given the fact that he has been at the club for 6 years, said that he is very happy there, but is open to whatever the future holds. And I think, in all honesty, would be very open to making the move to Manchester United if they were to go the Thomas Frank route. Given the fact Thomas Tuchel is out, for example, it means the list that INEOS might have had to replace Ten Hag has grown smaller, because he would have surely been on that list, if not allegedly on the top of the list. So it's a big game this weekend, because we've got a Ten Hag under a lot of pressure, a Thomas Frank's Brentford, who plays very good football, and if they were to, for example, beat United this weekend at Old Trafford, would be send a massive message, not only, for example, against Ten Hag in terms of him having another bad result, but also a massive positive result, especially in the way they would potentially do it under Thomas Frank, in front of an INEOS board who will surely be in attendance after the turmoil of the last few weeks. So a very interesting game from that perspective. A little bit of sideshow, really, with regards to Thomas Frank being involved on Saturday, when Erik Ten Hag's job has been under more pressure than ever, to be perfectly frank. Excuse the pun. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, look, Thomas Frank. It's so difficult to know, how good some of these managers are, for example, at lower clubs, because we see teams doing really well under a certain manager and within a certain structure. For example, we saw Graham Potter doing phenomenal things over at Brighton, and then made the move to Chelsea. He didn't quite manage to sort of translate that, and he's not the first. He won't be the last. We've seen lots of that happen. I mean, go back to, for example, Andre Villas-Boas and take over Chelsea and the likes of that. We've seen managers of smaller clubs then get the sort of the big job, and sometimes it's just too much for them. Whether it's a case of a lot of their success came down to the environment they were in, whether it's a case of, maybe they weren't quite ready, whether it's a case of they, didn't know how to handle some of the bigger egos, the pressure, for example. There's a lot of reasons why sometimes they fail, and they're not always, for example, the ones to blame. I mean, often, for example, sometimes these managers get opportunities because the teams are doing really badly. I mean, it's very rare that you're going to go to a top team, when they're doing really well, because top teams tend to, only sort of sack their managers when they're struggling. So you look at David Moyes coming in United, that was a settled United side. Pep Guardiola coming in City was a settled City side, and now a Slot coming into Liverpool as a settled side. So those are the sort of few occasions where you see a new manager coming in to a very settled side with good structures and a very settled environment. And I think that Thomas Frank coming to United is not going to be. It's going to be a move he's going to definitely take. I mean, he'd love the move, I'm sure, but I think he's pretty much been set up to fail, given the fact that the structures and the whole environment, the ecosystem at Manchester United is just so poor at the moment. So it's going to be an interesting one to see how it all plays out. But regardless of whether he eventually, if it does take over United or whatever, or where he moves, Saturday's another big opportunity for him to demonstrate his managerial prowess by going to an Old Trafford and potentially getting results against a struggling Manchester United side who sit in the bottom half of the table, well into the bottom half of the table, and already 10 points off the lead. So it's a bit of a disaster. And, 3 points is the minimum for United this weekend. Cannot afford anything less than that. Anything less than that, and Ten Hag goes back to being under a lot of pressure. And, how far do you slip down the table before you start to make the big calls? And at the moment, I don't think we can slip much further, to be perfectly honest. So it's interesting because, I like Ten Hag, for example, and I think that he, in a better environment and if United were in a different position, I think he could have succeeded. But I think he's made a lot of mistakes, and I think he's been quite stubborn in terms of not changing things. And I think he's making a lot of mistakes at the moment with regards to changing centre backs all the time, and making those sort of calls in terms of as well, like some like taking over Rashford after some of the best minutes he's had, rotating players because we won't need to worry about the schedule at a time when your job's on the line, the season's a disaster. Not really the time to be worrying about player management, to be perfectly honest. At the end of the day, it's about results. It's got to be results driven at the moment. And as a manager, I wouldn't be sitting there saying, "Oh, listen, we need to rest Rashford because come December he's going to be tired." I think it's a case of you get the results, and that's what you've got to do, and that has to be the thinking. And if it's not the thinking from Ten Hag, well then it's kind of a bit of a red flag in many ways with regards to how desperately he wants to keep this job and what he thinks is good enough to be at Manchester United. So yeah, interesting to see what Thomas Frank does. Now we're going to move into a very interesting story over here, which has come out very recently, and that is that Manchester United have apparently banned Chelsea scouts from attending their academy matches because apparently it is a response to the Blues doing a similar thing to them. Although apparently it's not official, there apparently are tensions between the sides because apparently a lot of Chelsea scouts have been coming to Manchester United games, academy games, and as a result, Manchester United Well, sorry, the Chelsea fans were Chelsea scouts were blocking them. So it's an interesting one. So basically, what is happening is that it sounds like Chelsea fans have been not Chelsea fans. Let me gather myself and we start this again. Right. So what is happening is that Manchester United are apparently going to ban Chelsea scouts because of what is happening with a reciprocal ban. Now, according to the Premier League, scouts are allowed to attend games, and as long as they've basically informed the club that they're coming. And apparently, there's not a massive accreditation process with regards to the clubs being able to be discerning with regards to who they allow in and don't. But apparently, they are looking at potentially reciprocating a potential ban from Chelsea scouts and to then ban Chelsea scouts from coming to United Academy games. Now, this has all come on the back of a signing when Chelsea lost Rio and Ngomoa to Liverpool during the summer, and apparently now a lot of this is now being sort of really, they're sort of battling down on who's allowed to attend academy matches and trying to prevent other sides or other clubs from getting into academy matches and being able to approach players. So it's quite a murky thing because you can't really stop it, can you? And it's unhealthy to be stopped it. You can't just have these academy games and just stop scouts from watching them. The reality is it's you basically need to have your players and be able to back yourself to be able to retain them. And if you can't, well, then unlucks. But that is apparently something that's happening. So apparently there's getting a lot more of a sort of accreditation process coming towards it, and they're being a lot more discerning about who they allow at the academy games, which I don't think is going to end well, but that is kind of what's happening. And it's a weird one because, yeah, I mean, you're talking about banning people from watching 16-year-olds because you're worried you're going to lose them. It's a bizarre situation to be in. And yeah, I don't think it's great for the game if we start sitting there banning scouts from coming to watch matches and the likes. I think it becomes very worrying. I think it's very murky, and I think that it's just going to create more troubles than it's probably worth. So I'll be very surprised if this ever sort of does go through, but it is something to monitor and see how things might play out with regards to these sort of instances and stuff like that. Moving on to some transfer news and some good news, because Team Talk are reporting that the Manchester United duo of Kobbie Mainoo and Ahmad are apparently very keen to sign new contracts at Old Trafford. Mainoo obviously being a very young player, well, both of them being young players, but Mainoo, as a teenager in the last year, become a mainstay in the side. Ahmad, for example, now becoming almost a sure starter every week as well. And Manchester Evening News was also reporting that Mainoo is close to signing a new deal, and apparently it looks like Ahmad is also very close. So in a time where you're looking at your squad and you're worrying about certain players and having to bring quality, it's nice to know that two players who are stepping up at the moment and are becoming key parts of the squad want to remain. Because if there are 3-4 players that you probably watched this season, you're thinking, yeah, those players are worth investing in. Kobbie Mainoo and Ahmad Diallo will be, on the top of those, or close to the top of that list. Mainoo's playing at England, for example. Ahmad's is now getting, after a really good loan, is getting a good opportunity. So some positive transfer news with regards to United, and hopefully we do get those contracts done. Hopefully nice and long term, and hopefully we can sort of ward off any potential suitors and not lose two of our brightest players at the moment. In terms of some other transfer news, there was news about Harry Maguire saying that it's unlikely to be sold by the club in the January transfer window. I don't see why we would. To be honest, I don't see why it's even a conversation. I mean, he was so good for us last year. It was so good. I think he would have started at the Euros had he been fit, and he's had a really good 12 months. I don't see why we go from there into then potentially selling him. Not when you still got Victor Lindelof at the club. Now, maybe the thinking is, I suppose, it might be easier to offload Harry Maguire from a form point of view, but look at the wages. You're not going to get rid of those wages like this. So he's going to be a very difficult player to sell. You're not going to get a lot of money out of him. And I think with Victor Lindelof still being at the club, Johnny Evans, for example, still being around. Yes, they might want much smaller contracts, But surely, you know, as United thing, we can't just be contract driven. You know, you've got to look at it and say, right, at the end of the day, Lindelof, Evans leave before Maguire with regards to quality. You know, if you've got Maguire, your De Ligt, Martinez, your top 4 centre backs, I'm pretty happy with that. Then if you've got a Johnny Evans, fine, so be it. That means that a young centre back can go on loan somewhere, for example, and get some experience, then great. But, you know, at the moment, he's very much in our top 4 centre backs. On his day, he's been really good for us recently, so I think he deserves the chance to stay and to fight for his place. And I don't see why that would potentially change, to be perfectly honest. Speaking of transfer news, though, there is some more stories about the fact that United are looking to bring in Benjamin Sesko. They potentially, they tried to bring him in earlier, I think back in 2022, during the summer transfer window, and failed. And they actually held discussions with his agent during the summer, looking for that long-term goal scorer. Now, despite us having signed Joshua Zirkzee, you know, maybe it's time to realize as well that we've not necessarily once again signed a goal scorer. So I think it'll be a weird backward move to almost sort of go back in for him, given the fact that we have signed Joshua Zirkzee, but we do need another goal scorer, don't we? We need a genuine goal scorer. I think this is the biggest problem, is that we went and we got two young, nice players, but we haven't found anybody who's going to be able to score 20-30 goals a season, and that continues to be a massive issue for the club itself. So yeah, it's an interesting situation, because, you know, how many strikers do you keep buying until you find goals? But I think we keep getting the wrong type of player. I think Hoyland was a really good a good option. I don't think Zirkzee was a bad signing, but again, we haven't signed goals. I want to go and find us. I mean, look what happened when City went to sign Holland, for example. They went to sign a genuine goal scorer, and he's just scoring goals for fun. It's getting a bit silly. You've got to find goal scorers, you know, and United haven't been signing goal scorers. We've not signed anybody who's got a fantastic, really good strike rate, really good record, you know, proven internationally and the likes, as a genuine goal scorer. So it's a position that continues to need strengthening, and I don't really know what the option is, apart from hope that Hoyland becomes that striker very quickly, which I think he's got the potential to. I have no doubt that I look at him from a potential point of view, and you know, I think that he does the potential to become a 20-30 goal striker. Whether he can do that in the next 18 months, I'm not convinced, and that's where the issue currently is. The fact that we just don't have a goal scorer right now. So lots to ponder for Erik Ten Hag ahead of this weekend. And we're going to wrap up there a little bit early this evening. We're going to be back live tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the morning, and then we'll also have a video up from the press conference immediately afterwards, so plenty to look forward to. And then we'll have our official preview, which will go live tomorrow night at 7:30 as well. So if you are new to the channel, smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well, and we'll see you